Now, you're based out of Pittsburgh,
Yeah,
and you are also a professor at the Carnegie Mellon Entertainment Technology Center. Is that correct?
right. That's right.
Which I toured a year or two ago. I've been down there a couple times, and hopefully you've seen those videos. It's like the greatest fun house I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, no, it is super fun there.
Jesse, what can you tell me about the Carnegie Mellon ETC? Because this is one of the top places on earth that people go who want to get into the video game industry.
Yeah, I've been teaching there about 10 years now, and I just think it's a fantastic place. It's a very different program than other places you'll run into. There are places that kind of try and give you an undergraduate degree in game development, et cetera, et cetera. The ETC is different because the ETC is very much about team collaboration.
Yes.
Because it's about inventing. It's trying to prepare people for the future, not for the present. And the whole notion of it is we take in about 40% computer science and software engineering, about 40% artists, 20% miscellaneous into this master's level program, and we put them on projects that are designed to teach them how to be interdisciplinary innovators, teaching them how to invent things that they wouldn't have been able to create on their own.
Okay. Now, do you come at this from an actual game design standpoint, or are you coming, do you bring to it more of the business and project management experience side?
Well, it's both. I mean, because all those things go together. Because if you're going to make real things in the real world, you've got to have strong design. You've got to have business reasoning behind why it works. And if you're going to get it done, you better have good project management. So, we need to bring all of those things to the table when we work on things at the ETC.
And people from the ETC have gone on to work on projects like the Halo series, World of Goo, and then also numerous Hollywood motion pictures.
Oh, sure. No, lots of big games. Because we got our people everywhere. We've got them at EA, we've got them at Zynga, we've got them at Disney, we've got them at Pixar. They're everywhere. I mean, we've been graduating people for, I guess, 11, 12 years now, so it's a great alumni community, without a doubt.
Do you have a favorite success story from an ETC graduate?
Oh, I guess there's a few that are easy to point to. I mean, World of Goo is a great example because that started out as a week-long project that a student did. It was Kyle Gabler had done it. It was a game called Tower of Goo, started at the ETC. And after he graduated, he took a year and got together with somebody else, and they turned it into World of Goo, and it's been tremendously successful.
That makes a great iPad game, by the way. World of Goo plays well on the iPad.
Right. No, that it was interesting because it is a little bit processor heavy because there's so much physics going on, and there was always a lot of question about what platforms can you take it to and what platforms can't you. So like the Nintendo DS would have seemed like a natural for it with the stylus, but it just didn't have the processing power to make it happen. But the iPad just barely seems to cross the threshold, and they did a great job with that. Another one I think of is Neil Druckmann. Neil Druckmann came to the ETC, and he was passionate about the company Naughty Dog. And he did great work while he was at the ETC. We were able to make some introductions to folks there. And after graduating, he started working there. And not too much later, he ends up being a co-lead designer of Uncharted 2, which I think is kind of a landmark game in recent years.
Well, those are both some pretty high-profile ones. It's I love the setup down there too. You've got just the artwork, the comic artwork. It's Optimus Prime that's in the one hallway, right? You have, I think, Spider-Man and all kinds of other great stuff down there.
Oh yeah, we've got stuff all over the place because we're just always trying to keep people in the mind of the sort of things that that they can create and that they're going to create.
Now, do you yourself learn some things from teaching that you then bring into Schell Games? And I assume you work with a number of producers on your games. Like, you are not actually the lead producer on all the Schell Games, are you?
No, we just have too much going on. I mean, Schell Games is 65 people. It's not a trivial operation anymore. I serve as kind of an executive producer, helping to kind of line things up and get things going and helping out where I can. But we have just teams of of incredible people here who do all kinds of great work.
Do they do people from ETC come into Schell Games? Do they get internships there? Is there some collaboration between the two of you?
I try, it's kind of like Ghostbusters. You got to be careful not to cross the streams when you're doing two different operations like this, because there's a lot of ways you can you don't want to put students in some weird situation. So I try to be very careful about that. But I do hire alums sometimes after they graduate, and there are sometimes that people do. We will sometimes take a couple interns, as summer interns or something from the school.
Okay, well, what's your background? How did you get into the position where you are the CEO of a game company, as well as being a professor?
Yeah, I often ask myself that question. I've always been interested in entertainment. I've always been interested in games. I started programming computer games when I was maybe 12 years old. I had kind of a weird set of teenage years. I sort of ran off and joined the circus at one point, and I was a professional circus performer for several years. Working as a juggler. At some point, I decided I'd like to eat 3 meals a day, and so I got a degree in computer science at Rensselaer. Started on a very traditional sort of software development path. Ended up getting a master's degree at Carnegie Mellon in computer networking, and that was where I got introduced to virtual reality. My experience with that enabled me to find a position at the Disney company at the virtual reality studio there, and I worked there from about 1995 to 2002, where I eventually became the creative director of the virtual reality studio at Disney. I'd become friends there with Randy Pausch, famous for the last lecture, and he was one of the founders of the ETC. We'd stayed in touch over the years, and at some point my wife and I decided we wanted to move from California back east, and we're thinking, where the heck are we going to go back east? And we'd both liked Pittsburgh from the time we lived there when I was in grad school. Called up Randy and said, hey, how would you feel about having me come and teach game design on a full-time basis? And he and Don talked it over, and it's worked out. And I've been here ever since. And I ended up starting Schell Games initially as just an independent consulting operation for myself. But some projects came up where I could hire a few people I knew, and then bit by bit we've sort of grown it over the last 10 years and that's kind of how I ended up here.
What are some of the next big projects coming out from Schell Games that you'd like to tell people about?
Well, again, we continue to be excited about Puzzle Clubhouse, which we did a Kickstarter campaign for, which was very successful, and we're planning to launch that in June, and so that's June-ish is kind of what we're talking about. But people can come and sign up now. You go to puzzleclubhouse.com. You can sign up and get information now. We may even get some parts of that out sooner. Mm-hmm. Keep an eye out for that InnerCube game because it's going to more and more platforms. Is that
InnerCube or InterCube?
InnerCube, sort of like inner tube with a C, where the T would be. Okay. And another game we've got out there is called Triazzle, which is it's kind of this really fun sort of triangle puzzle game. You can find that actually on Big Fish Games, and we're getting that onto more and more platforms too. But if you go to triazzleisland.com, you can just download it directly. Is a great way to do that. We've got a number of other things that we're doing right now, and I got to always think, well, which ones can I talk about and which ones can't I talk about? More and more we're getting into educational games. One of them that has been announced is a project we're doing with Yale University, which is a game designed to help prevent the incidence of HIV in inner-city teenagers. It's not going to be released like a normal game because we're going to put it through a couple of years of scientific study. But we are kind of going full bore trying to make it into the greatest game that it can be. And so some studies are going to start happening on this summer with that. Hopefully we'll get some interesting press out of that because we're learning a ton as we do that.
And this is a game I believe you were talking about this when we spoke before, where students can make decisions and then see the outcome 10 years or 15 years out. Is that right?
Yeah, because when people think about something like an HIV game or something, they assume, okay, this is just going to be some game that tries to hit kids with a couple facts, and that's not enough, and it's clear that that's not enough. And so this game has a fascinating backing on a lot of psychological research about what makes a difference. And part of the reason we're focusing on kids with this, when I say kids, we're focusing on kind of ages, let's say, 11 to 14, inner city kids, is because when you look at where HIV gets spread a lot in the inner cities, and it gets spread by younger teenagers more than anybody else because they're ignorant about, safe sex practices. And so there's a lot of psychology built into this thing, and part of the key is the notion that teenagers who tend to be more responsible are ones who have a vision of what they want their future to be. But there's a lot of teenagers out in the world who they're in a situation that's kind of rotten, and they haven't really thought about their future. They're just so in the present. And when you're in the present, you can make more dangerous decisions. And so part of the notion of this is the game encourages kids to help paint a picture of, no, really, when you're 25, what would you really like your life to be like? And by getting them to kind of paint that picture, then we can say, hey, that's a cool picture. Let's talk about what it would take you to get there. And let's look at some of the scenarios that could go down between where you are now and that point that could really interfere with that future. Things that, would keep you from being able to go to college or get a great job or have enough money to get the car you want, etc. And then we get to dig down into each of these different scenarios and get them to explore these scenarios and the outcomes. Now, some facts and things come along the way, but it's much more about getting kids to go on a kind of mental and emotional journey about, like, what are you really going to be dealing with as an older teenager and as an adult, and how do you deal with it? And so I'm just thrilled to death that we're able to